are so excited that you are here joining us for part 3 of our series, Ordinary Joe, how God used one ordinary man for an extraordinary purpose. We hope that you've been able to connect with the ordinariness of Joseph as we continue the journey toward Christmas, which is very close if you did not realize. Today we're talking about how Joseph acted with incredible bravery in the face of fear of the unknown and uncertainties of becoming the father of Jesus, who was not his biological son. I'm sure that you'll be able to relate on some level. But before we jump in, just a reminder that we'd love it if you took a moment after to like this post, comment on something that stood out to you, and definitely share it with a friend. Now let's continue on with our story of Ordinary Joe.
How would you feel if someone came up to you and was like, "Don't be afraid"? Do you think you'd calm down immediately and be like, "Not scared"? No, you'd probably start freaking out because it is implying that you should be panicking right now. It's basically like me telling you, "Don't think about a pink elephant," and now you're all thinking about pink elephants. Well, our ordinary Joe, Joseph, was just told in a dream to not be afraid. Cue the panic. Now, let's be real, he was in a bit of a weird situation. He had just been told by his fiancée Mary that she was pregnant, but not pregnant because she cheated on him, pregnant because God made her pregnant and it was God's son, and it's a bit of a weird situation. There's no textbook or book you can read to help you maneuver how you should respond in that situation, because it's never happened before. So Joseph is in a little bit of a weird spot. So he processes some things and he figures out, okay, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate from Mary quietly so she can remain her dignity. And then I'm going to go back and just live my simple life as a carpenter. I've got it all figured out. This is what I'm going to do. He basically just wanted to get back to continuing life as per usual, get rid of all the complications and just get back to the simple life. And so he was just going to walk away from the one thing that was causing his life to be complicated, which was his pregnant virgin fiancée. But God had other plans for him. He was calling Joseph into the greatest adventure of his life, and it was going to be no small feat, nor was it going to be an adventure that would just take 5 minutes of his day. It was going to be something that he would have to embark on for the rest of his life. And the fact that God had to tell him through a dream to not be afraid implies that this was a call that God was giving him that was going to make him scared. It was going to push him out of his comfort zone. It was going to challenge him, and it was going to involve risk, and it was going to involve fear. God knew that, which is why he told him, "Joseph, don't be afraid." So all of these things that we're scared of, things like spiders and snakes and tight spaces and flying, all those things that we talk about as ordinary fears. But the thing that God was calling Joseph into that was going to cause him fear goes a little bit deeper than, say, seeing a spider in your bedroom. This was going to be a call and something that was going to radically turn his entire life upside down. He was being tasked with raising a son who is not his own, and he was going to have to nurture him and care for him and raise him up to lead people. He was going to be tasked with the greatest challenge and job of his life. Now, this ordinary carpenter probably was just planning on living a simple life, but now, not only was he going to have to raise a son who is not his own, he was going to also have to fight against the inner reality that this son wasn't his own. He was also going to have to fight against the opinions that people were going to have about the situation that he was in. And he'd probably also have to work really hard to build a solid foundation of trust with Mary and truly come to believe that it's true she didn't cheat on him with another man. The call to not be afraid for Joseph was a call that would impact his everyday life going forward. It would pull at his heart, and it would challenge his mind, and it would push his faith with greater intensity than anything else. And the call that he received isn't just an ordinary call that anyone can receive. It would take guts to accept that mission to raise God's son. But God knew that ordinary Joe, though ordinary and though with a good dose of fear inside of him, that he would be up for the challenge of raising God's son, Jesus. Ordinary Joe had to get real close to his fears. He could have chosen to sit on the sidelines. He could have chosen to cheer someone else on to do the hard work. And he could have chosen to just going back to be an ordinary carpenter. But rather, he took up the call and he decided, I'm not going to let this fear get in the way. And it kind of reminds me of the beloved character Sam Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. Now, Sam and his buddy Frodo go on this massive adventure to go tackle Mount Doom. Yes, they did that. Now, the challenge that Sam went on wasn't necessarily his mission. It was Frodo's, but he was like, I'm going to go with him and I'm going to lean in with Frodo and go on this great adventure. And he was so scared every step of the way. There were so many unknowns and so much uncertainty and so much coming at them that they should have been scared of. But he decided, I'm not going to let this fear stop me, and we're going to go on this greatest adventure of our lives together. He says, I know we are going to take a very long road into darkness, but I know I can't turn back. I don't rightly know what I want, but I have something to do before the end, and it lies ahead, not in the Shire. I must see it through, sir, if you understand me. The Shire was a safe and beautiful place, yes. If you've ever seen the movie, you know that it is a beautiful place. It's a place that Sam could have remained to stay in a place of comfort and safety, but instead he chose to go with Frodo and to leave Shire, and that together they went on the greatest adventure of their life, and it was filled with lots of risk and lots of uncertainty and lots of unknowns. But in that situation, they were forced to then rely on each other, and they were forced to activate their bravery, because you can only be brave in the face of fear. You can't be brave when you're just in a comfortable, easy place. And as they left on this adventure, it shaped them as people and shaped their character in a way that staying in Shire wouldn't have ever been able to do. Now, Joseph decided to leave his own version of Shire. He decided he wasn't going to go back to a life of ease and a life of simplicity, but he was going to step into the place that it was going to cause his life to be complicated, and that there was going to be struggle and a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties. Yet he chose to go forward, even if it meant that his knees were shaking and his voice was trembling. But he knew that something better was beyond the fear. What stops us from leaving Shire? And what could have stopped Joseph from entering into this call from God to raise his son, Jesus? It's excuses. It's things like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't have the qualifications. I don't feel ready. What if something bad happens? What if people make fun of me? What if my dog eats my homework? Okay, maybe not the last one, but all of the others are excuses that we use regularly that stop us from entering into something that could be so great. It's not the fear that stops us. It's actually the excuses. Every great thing that God calls people into requires an element of risk and should require an element of fear. He's not going to call us into something that we can do on our own strength or in our own power, or where we can just depend on ourselves. No, he calls us in to depend on him and to depend on his strength and his power, even though we're so scared, because then he can reveal himself through that situation. Ultimately, it's God asking ordinary people to do extraordinary things. But you can't really do the math there. Like, ordinary people can't really do extraordinary things. It's like asking me to paint the Mona Lisa. I can't do it. I don't have the skills. But despite the doubt, or despite the fear of failing to recreate the Mona Lisa, if I had someone who had extraordinary talent kind of lead me and guide me along the journey so that I could create something extraordinary, I could do that a little bit better. But it wouldn't be my own skills and my own talent that did that. It would be me relying on the person with extraordinary talent and skills to lead me along the way. And so Joseph was asked to do something that he didn't know how to do. Kind of like me creating the Mona Lisa. He didn't know how to be a father, and not just any type of father, but a father to a son who wasn't his own, and also a father to God's son. He didn't know how to do that. But God promised, hey, Joseph, even though you're scared about this, I'm going to guide you and I'm going to lead you every step of the way. I recognize that you are an ordinary man, but I am an extraordinary God, and we are going to do this. It would require him to lean into his faith and depend on God in a way that he never would have had to if he just went to a simple, ordinary life that he had probably planned on living before. He would totally need to depend on God's guidance. And what's crazy is that God's plan to redeem the world through sending Jesus was going to depend on this one man's ordinary life. And God was going to use his ordinary life to do something extraordinary to redeem the world. All Joseph had to do was just be willing to say yes. We are all ordinary people. Sorry to not call you special, but to be human is to be ordinary. But we have an extraordinary God, and our extraordinary God wants to use ordinary people in his plan. And if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will. But we have Joseph, ordinary Joe, who was a simple carpenter, who lived in Nazareth, but was born in Bethlehem. And he was engaged to a lovely gal named Mary. And he had family, and he had friends, and he had to eat food, and he had to lay down and sleep to recharge. You and I, we have jobs or schools that we go to or families that we're raising. And we have family and we have friends and we have neighbors. We have grocery stores we go to get food. We have places that we go to sleep, to recharge. We are just as ordinary as Joseph. In his ordinariness, Joseph chose to look beyond himself. He chose to look beyond his own comfort and his own desires. And he was going to look at somebody else. He looked at Mary, and he looked at Jesus, and he looked at God's plan and his call on his life. What are you looking at? Are you looking at trying to live a life of comfort and ease and simplicity? Or are you choosing to look at the people that are around you? Your coworkers, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your peers? Are you choosing to look at the people in our city who are caught in sex trafficking, who are living on the streets in homelessness, who are caught up in addiction? Because doing life with other people is messy and it's complicated, and it should cause us to tremble with fear because it's hard. And just listing off some of those things might cause you to get really overwhelmed and might start thinking like, oh, I can't do it, or think that there's this too much need and you don't even think it's worth trying to step in. And I'm going to pause you there. And I'm going to ask you to look at who's in front of you. For Joseph, right in front of him was Mary and a baby named Jesus. Who's in front of you? We all have a location. Who's there with you? We're part of a local church. What are the ways that you can step in and serve? If you're part of our local church at North Park Huron, that means you're automatically involved with 2 local schools. How can you step in there? I think it's all about praying and opening ourselves up to be available to how God wants to use us. Just like Joseph was being available and obedient to how God wanted to use him. I've tried to turn this into a bit of a daily practice for myself, where most evenings I go for a walk downtown, and every time I step out that door and start walking, I just pray. I'm like, God, I am available to whoever you want me to talk to. If there's someone that you want me to interact with, I am ready. And that causes a bit of an element of fear inside of me, because I don't know who might come across my path. I don't know what kind of conversation I might have. And sometimes I don't, and sometimes I do. And I always just want to be available to who God might want to put in my path, despite the uncertainty and despite the unknowns of what that might look like. So what scares you? Because if it scares you, you're probably looking in the right direction. If we're just living comfortable lives where we can be dependent on ourselves and dependent on our own strength and power, then we should probably start asking ourselves some pretty tough questions. So are you willing to lean into that fear? Just like Joseph was willing to lean into the fear and step away from the simple life that he had planned for himself, and he was willing to step in despite his knees trembling. The Bible says don't be afraid 365 times. So every day, if we choose to live on this grand adventure with God, we're going to need that reminder to not be afraid every day, because there should be things that we are scared of and things that we are going to have to rely on God and be dependent on his strength to get us through. Because every day is an ordinary day as ordinary people, just like ordinary Joe, but we serve an extraordinary God who wants to take us on an extraordinary adventure if we're willing to say yes.
It's amazing how God uses ordinary people like ordinary Joe, but also, like you and I, to be part of his extraordinary story. But we have to remember to not let fear stop us from saying yes. We need to remember that saying yes can take us on the greatest adventure of our lives. So, will you say yes, even in the face of fear? We are going to finish off this series next week. But be sure to keep checking out our Facebook and Instagram pages to stay tuned with everything going on with the church this season. There are opportunities we don't want you to miss. So, whatever you do, come back next week. And whatever else you do, share this with someone. Click that button right now. There's an ordinary Joe somewhere in your world that will thank you for it.